Hi, Steve Clifford, and today I might not kill any sacred cows, but we might flog it just a wee bit, a couple of them. And let me start off by saying this is not new stuff. This is not stuff that I've invented or come up with. It's my explanation of what some other people have come up with. So there's a guy in the long-range shooting community, Chris Way. Now, Chris Way is an interesting character because he's very well known in the long-range shooting community, and he's a competitor, he's an instructor, he's got a website, Rifle Craft, that's craft with a K, but the neat thing about him is he's an innovator. He's one of these guys that questions everything, and he's very data-driven. He wants to see exactly in measurable results what happens when you start changing some things up. He's also very into understanding the mechanics of how things happen, and not just with a gun, but with your body. Biologically, what is going on with your body and how it interfaces with a rifle. And in that, he's challenged a few things. Now, the first thing, I don't think he actually came up with, but he's really good at describing it, and that is prone shooting position. If you go to a belly match, what is referred to as a belly match, that's a long-range rifle match where everyone's shooting from prone, you're going to notice that about 2/3 of the guys are going to have a really interesting shooting position. They are so low to the ground. They're not just their bellies are on the ground, their chest is on the ground. The bipod, and this is not really the bipod they would be using, but you'll notice that their bipods are no more than 6 to 9 inches long. They're using a game changer for their rear support. And the game changer has this dip in the middle, and they're putting the back of the rifle right there in that. And then they're getting super, super low to the ground. And you'll watch them get all the way down like this. And you'll notice the butt of the rifle is right at my clavicle here, right on top of my shoulder. And that's the position that they are shooting from. You'll notice that they're pressing down fairly hard here. And some of them are even kind of rolling their head over to be able to look through the scope because everything is so incredibly low. Chris looked at that and said, why? Why are we shooting from this low of a position? And he said, I can't do it. You know, he's got bolts in his neck. And I know a lot of people who just can't stay in that position for a long period of time. Now, if you're young and agile, sure you can do it, but you're really having to look up to be able to see through the scope. It's not a comfortable position. So the position that he describes is a kid watching TV laying on the floor. You ever watched a 5-year-old watch television? They all do it the same way. They put their elbows down about like this. About like this. Well, if you do that, and that's the position you're going to be in, you're sloped upwards a bit. You're not laying completely flat. Well, that's going to take some changes because if you bring the gun up to your shoulder at that point, now the gun is facing down. We need taller bipods. You also need a taller rear bag. So this is something that snipers hide. Frank Galley has been working with, and his partner Mark Taylor came up with this as a rear bag. It's just a simple bag stuffed pretty full, and that allows you to create a bridge where you have just enough forward pressure to hold the gun here and then get yourself into position. That's a much more natural position. It's the same position as that kid watching TV, and you can stay in this position even if you have neck problems, even if you have back issues, mobility concerns. This keeps you off the deck. It keeps your chest off the deck. So that's one of the sacred cows that Chris started looking at. But the next one is a lot more controversial, and it has to do with scopes. So everybody talks about low mounted scopes, mounting a scope as low over the bore as possible. That's been the tradition. That's what we've always believed. That's what we've been taught. You ever ask anyone why we do that? You'll get some weird responses, because none of the responses has anything to do with physics, with the mechanics of the rifle, the mechanics of the human body, your neck, your eyes, or anything else. All it is preference. Well, I prefer it that way. It looks better. It's more compact. Well, yeah, it is all of those things, but why? What's the benefit? And if you really start probing, you're going to irritate some people, and they'll start making fun of you and say, what, you want to put a periscope on that thing? It really quickly degrades that fast. There's only two things that I've ever heard that are good arguments in favor of keeping a scope mounted this low. Number one is if you are shooting in a situation where you have a low barricade, something that is over top of you that you need to get under. Okay, so for those specific situations, yes, a low mounted scope is going to help. The second reason is really dealing with those old style scope mounts that we used to see, the old see-through mounts, where there was two tiny little screws holding a ring that had a place where you could see the iron sights underneath your scope. Well, those things, yeah, under recoil, those could break because you're relying on two very thin little screws, got a hard kicking rifle, and God only knows what up top. You had questionable metallurgy both on the screws and the mount, and yeah, they could break. They weren't real sturdy. But that's not how we make guns these days. Now we have Picatinny rails, we have all these other things. And Chris started questioning, why do we do this? So watch what happens when I get into a shooting position. Now I'm going to look at a target, and I'm going to look at the target, I'm going to bring the gun up, and right now I'm looking over top of the scope turret. If I want to see that target through the scope, I have to duck my head down. Now I'm on target, but take a look at my eyes. Cameraman, focus in closely here. What is my eye doing? Where's my eye in the socket? I'm looking up, aren't I? My eyeball is looking at inclined in my socket. Is that natural? Does that make sense for a human being? We're predators. We have eyes in the front of our head for a reason. If you have somebody coming towards you who wants to fight you, do you duck your head and look up at them like this? Or do you look at them square in the eye? You look at them square, don't you? But you don't with a rifle. To see your target, you've got to look up because you just dipped your head. Think about a bird. If there's a bird flying overhead, are you going to keep your head level and look up at it like this? No, you're not. You're going to turn your head and you're going to look straight at it with your eyes centered in their sockets. There's a good reason for this. Try looking up for about 10 seconds. After about 5 seconds, you're going to feel strain in the muscles of your eyes. That is eye strain. And that's why you can't stay in a scope for too long, is you're looking up through the lens, and eventually you've got to break away from that. You've got to break away, shake it off, focus on something else, relax those muscles in your eyes again. It's not natural. So what's the fix for that? Well, I'm going to show you. Promise not to laugh. You mount this scope up high, and I mean really high. And this is what Chris Way did. Chris Way started looking at it, and he said, listen, the distance from my clavicle to my eyeball, he's a tall guy, but it's about 8 inches. Most people, it's in that 6-7 inch range, maybe 8 inches from your clavicle to your eye. So why are we mounting that scope so stinking low? Well, watch what happens when I look at a target and bring this gun up to my face. Staring at the target, bring up the gun. Guess what? I'm looking at the target in the scope. I have full field of view right now. Actually, I don't, because my power's up too much. But when I do this, I don't have to duck my head at all. Now take a look at where my eye is in the socket. If you zoom in close, you can see that my eye is dead level in the eye socket. It's a more natural position. Is it faster? Well, I haven't put a timer to it yet. I haven't gone out and done the snapshots with it yet, but it would seem to be that since it is naturally coming up and I don't have to duck my head down, I don't have to look up, seems like it'd be a whole lot faster. So there's a lot of things going on, and there's some other benefits to this as well. When you mount a scope up this high, if you're using it as a hunting rifle and you don't have a dialing turret, you're not zeroed at 100 yards and then dial for everything else, but you just want to set and forget, you're going to be setting to maximum point blank range. Do the calculation on that. Try a calculation of maximum point blank range with a scope that is 1.5 inches over the bore, and then do it again 3.5 inches over the bore. You're going to find that you gain between 20 to 40 yards in maximum point blank range. So there's some physics here. A couple of other advantages. Center of gravity. So the center of gravity on most rifles is down about here, and everything below the center of the bore, during recoil, the gun wants to pivot upwards. It's going to pivot around the center of gravity. Well, if you move the center of gravity up by raising the scope, you're going to move that center of gravity up, hopefully to be right in line with the center of the bore. So during recoil, the impulse is going to come back, not pivoting around that center of gravity and raising the muzzle. Let's talk about cheek pieces here, because every time I've shown this to someone or talked about it, they say, oh my God, well, I'd have to have a 4-inch tall cheek riser. No, you don't. And that gets back to the original point about the prone shooting position. So there's two ways to use a cheek piece and a cheek riser. One is an anchor point. And if you're anchoring, you're pressing down. If you're looking down, you're pressing down and pressing your face into that scope. Watch what happens to my cheek when I'm looking through this one. My cheek is pressed up here, isn't it? Well, you don't need to do that. And as a matter of fact, any downward pressure you're putting here is going to change your point of impact downrange. When that bullet unseats from the cartridge and starts down the barrel, the gun already starts to move back. It unseats itself from whatever support you've got back here. And if your cheek is pressing down as an anchor, you're raising the muzzle. Now that's fine if you have exactly the same downward pressure for every single shot from every single position. But if you don't have exactly the same amount of downward force, you're going to change your point of impact. Well, how about you don't put any downward force at all? How about you just index this thing? And if you're indexing it, it means that you're not pressing down, you're just using it as a reference point. Well, that reference point can be down here, it can be here, it can be up here. Anywhere along here is fine. But for me, I can just come up naturally, and you notice that it is just touching my lower jawline here. It's not pressing into it. Matter of fact, I have this cheek piece set as low as it can go. I could raise it, but I don't like it raised. I don't want it raised because I don't want to be pressing down into my stock. So those are all reasons to start thinking about these higher mounted scopes. Now, here's the next issue. There's only 2 companies that I have found that make a 1-inch riser, and that's what this is, a 1-inch riser, and then I've got, I think it's about a 1.25 inch ring above it. But the companies that make them are Chinese brand. I don't know their quality control, but Under the Gun and Monstrum are the 2 that make these things. Chris Way is working with a company right now to make a set of rings that is a 2.5 inch ring mount, which should mount the scope about 3.5 inches over the center line of the bore. He thinks that's probably the right number for most people. I think he's right. Now, does this thing look weird? Yep. Are some people going to call this a periscope and just jokingly knock it off? Sure there are. But let's talk about it from the basis of physics, biology, ergonomics, and what it's actually doing for you. I think it's hard to argue against this. I really do. But if you've got a good scientific argument against this, I'd love to hear it. I'm still working with this. I'm still playing with it. I'm not 100% on board, but I'm pretty far on board with this, unless I can see something later on that tells me it was a mistake. This seems like a really good solution. So anyway, that's my latest. That is the poking of the sacred cows. We'll see how that goes over. And if you want to take a look at Frank Galley or Mark Taylor's stuff, they're on Sniper's Hide. So is Chris Way. And then Chris Way also has riflecraft.com. So check them out there. And subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm Steve Clifford. Thank you for watching.